All right, now we're joined by Michael Spearman, who's running for re-election to the Court of Appeals, Division I, Position 2. So go ahead with a 2-minute introduction.
Okay, my name is Michael Spearman. I have been a member of the Court of Appeals since 2010. I was appointed to that position by Governor Gregoire, and I stood for election twice since then. Neither time have I had an opponent. I do have an opponent on this occasion. I think my strongest asset, and the reason I should be returned to the Court of Appeals, is the breadth of experience that I have accumulated over almost 30 years practicing law. I've been on, as I indicated, I've been on the Court of Appeals for the last 7 years. I've heard every type of case that can be brought in our courts. I have been the acting chief judge, which is the same as the assistant chief judge of our division. I've been the chief judge of our division. I'm now the presiding chief judge of all 3 divisions of the Court of Appeals. I spent 14 years as a King County Superior Court judge. In that position, I worked in every department of our court, juvenile, family law, criminal, civil. I handled all of the cases that can be brought in that general jurisdiction court. I served on the executive committee there for over 10 years. I served as the assistant presiding judge and the chief criminal judge, well, chief judge of the criminal department, I should say, for 3 years while I was in the Superior Court. In between my time in Superior Court and Court of Appeals, I worked at a place called Judicial Dispute Resolution. I was a professional mediator and arbitrator. In that position, as one of my pro bono services, I mediated disputes between citizens and police officers. That led me to be appointed as the independent auditor for the Seattle Police Department as part of the Office of Professional Accountability. And I served in that capacity, I think, a little over a year before I was appointed to the Court of Appeals. I guess I'll stop there.
All right, great. So now we have our 4 prepared questions, and they're right in front of you if you want to turn it over and read along as we read them aloud. These are 2-minute answers, and Nicole, will you do number 1?
Sure. What barriers to access are there at the Court of Appeals for unrepresented litigants, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable populations? And what steps have you taken to promote access to justice?
You know, the Court of Appeals is a different court in a lot of ways. One of the things that struck me when I was there, when I first got appointed there, after coming from Superior Court, where you have just tremendous interaction with litigants, with witnesses, with jurors, even a different kind of interaction with the lawyers. In the Court of Appeals, you hardly ever see anybody. I mean, lawyers come to court and they argue, but you don't really see the litigants, and so it's hard to get a real sense of what the barriers are. But what I have learned is it is almost a minefield for a lawyer, for a person who's acting pro se, to come to the trial court. It's even more of a minefield to try to navigate one's way through the Court of Appeals. It's all done pretty much by documents. You have to know the rules, you have to know the filing, and the rules can be pretty obscure sometimes. So I think some of the things that we can do to promote access to the court is, I guess, 2 things. One, make sure that our rules are clear and understandable by ordinary folks who have to read them. Our opinions have to be written in plain English and not in legalese, because we expect pro se litigants to conduct themselves like lawyers. If you can't understand the cases that you're relying on to promote your case, how can you act as a lawyer? If you can't read the rules or understand the rules because they're written in a way that ordinary people don't understand, how can you represent yourself and act like the lawyer that we expect you to? So I think those are some of the things that are prohibited. The other thing, since I have 8 more seconds, is just people who speak limited English. We need to make our forms more accessible to them and make them more available in languages that they speak.
Great. Liz, number 2.
Me, Liz?
Yes.
Sorry. What state or federal Supreme Court decisions do you disagree with most?
You know, there are probably, I could name quite a few, but, you know, the one that most quickly comes to mind is Citizens United. Is the one that strikes me the most. We have been lucky in Washington in a lot of ways, particularly in judicial elections, in terms of how money has an impact and an influence. There have been some occasions when groups have tried to use money to influence judicial elections. So far, the Washington electorate has rejected it each time. There was an effort to unseat Chief Justice Jerry Alexander a few years ago. And the kind of campaigning was just horrendous. They slandered him, they used these horrible photographs, and it was all about just trying to get him off the bench because they didn't like his decisions. That was rejected. Similarly this time, there was a concerted effort to get rid of Justice Wiggins, Justice Madsen, and one other, and Justice Yu. And it was just money sort of flooding in from outside the state. Again, the citizens of this state rejected that. But I think we have to be vigilant. Unless people are aware of what's happening, it's very easy for that kind of media and press to overwhelm the ability to make good decisions about who our judges are. You can always, there's always a debate about whether we should elect judges or not. You know, I think it's a difficult question, but I fall more on the side of electing judges than not electing judges. Because if I wasn't subject to election, I'm not sure I would be in this room talking to you right now. And this is an opportunity, it's an opportunity that causes judges and requires judges to get out and talk to the people who they actually serve in our courts. So.
Actually, starting to answer number 3, Elizabeth.
Oh, okay.
Do you support the current system of electing judges, or do you support some other system such as appointment or an appointment and retention election hybrid? And if elections continue, what reform of the current campaign finance rules would you support?
Well, as I said, I think there are issues with electing judges. I think it's very difficult because most of what judges do, people don't see. I mean, if you've got a case in the court, that people will see that. Litigants will see that. If there's a controversial case that's out there, people may see what the judge does on that. But then you may disagree or agree with what the judge has done on that controversial case, but that's still only one decision that the judge has made out of thousands that he or she is going to make during the course of a year. So is it fair to judge based on that? I think not. So it's, what do people rely on then when they try to vote on this judge versus that judge? I think it's a very difficult question for most folks to answer. And I get questions all the time from my neighbors, my friends. Well, you're a judge, you must know. Who should I vote for? Well, I offer my recommendations, I always do. But it's just an example of how difficult it is to select judges by the election process. On the other hand, I cannot think of a better way to pick. I don't think just appointing judges is great. I'm not sure that I like retention. The problem with retention is if, let's say you make an unpopular decision just before it's time for retention, you may get booted out, but you're booted out without any idea who your replacement is going to be. Now, if you have an election, at least you still have a choice. You know, you're choosing between this person and this person. And I think that's a much better way to select judges than just utilizing retention. So, and as I said, I think elections, it makes judges get out and talk to folks, and I think that's a good thing.
All right, Ben, number 4.
Please tell us about the types of community service that you do and the professional and public organizations you've been involved with.
Okay, I have, I've been involved in a lot of organizations over the years. I've been on the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. I was on the Commission for Interpreter Certification for a number of years. That was the commission that established and set up our process for qualifying interpreters, making sure that they were competent. I was a public defender for a long time before I got appointed to the bench. And one of the things that I saw was folks that who spoke limited English had the most difficult time in court. And before these rules were enacted, folks would, you never knew what kind of interpreter you were going to get. You never knew if your guy was getting it or wasn't getting it. Their family members would come up and interpret it, and you didn't know if they really understood legal terminology and were able to interpret it appropriately or not. So it was a real difficult time figuring out if these folks were, and I always imagine myself as if I was in Italy and I had to go to court. I would be at sea. I wouldn't understand a single thing, and your life could be at stake, and you have no way of appreciating what's going on, and you have no way of participating actively in the proceeding. So it was very important to me to try to develop a process of allowing, of creating a pool of competent interpreters for judges to use during those court proceedings. I guess I got off track a little bit there. I have been on the board of directors of the King County Bar Association. I've been chair of the King County Bar Association Diversity Committee. I've been on the board of the Court of Appointed Special Advocates. I have been on the board of CDRNR, a drug and alcohol substance abuse treatment organization. I have currently vice chairman of the Oversight Committee for the Office of Civil Legal Aid.
But have you done anything in community service? All right, so now we'll open it up to follow-up questions. These are 1-minute answers, and we'll start with David.
You mentioned 14 years as a Superior Court judge and 7 years, I think it was, as
yes.
And being a lawyer for 30 years and starting as a public defender. I'm just wondering what it was that initially brought you to the Superior Court, and why you've chosen a path on that side of the bench rather than as a litigator.
Okay. When I graduated from undergraduate, it wasn't clear to me I wanted to be a lawyer. I ended up going to Houston, Texas, and worked at a place called Cameron Iron Works. I became a machinist. I joined the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. I became a shop steward. I represented folks in disciplinary proceedings and on the shop floor. And it was in representing those folks that I said, you know, being a lawyer might not be such a bad gig after all. So I ended up going to law school. I came out here to Seattle as an intern. I worked at the public defender's office, greatest experience I ever had. I decided to become a criminal defense lawyer, and that's primarily what I did during my 12 years of practice. What I like about the law, I loved representing people, but I liked even more finding the right decision, to try to find a result that is fair and just based on the law and the circumstances. You can really do that as a judge, and it's not what you're supposed to do as a lawyer. As a lawyer, you're supposed to represent your client, and I enjoyed doing that. But I really wanted to just become the person who tried to make that correct decision.
Additional questions? I'll ask one we often ask judges. Who is your judicial hero? Some Supreme Court of the state, of the nation, anybody who's been a judge that you emulate or admire?
You know, locally, Justice Utter, Robert Utter, is one of my heroes. I mean, he's one of the probably most intelligent, courageous, forthright, outspoken, caring, concerning justices that we've ever had in this state. On the federal level, you know, the more I read about Justice Thurgood Marshall, the more the guy is just my hero. He did so much, even before he got to the bench. He put his life at stake, and during that entire time, he never became cynical. He never decided that, he never thought the justice system was not a way to move things forward. And he fought and he fought, and he had such a beautiful career in front of the Supreme Court and then on the other side of the bench. So he's, every time there's a new biography about him, and I learned something new.
Okay. Additional questions? Additional questions? Usually this is a sign that they like you. I'm wondering, you do have an opponent. I looked him up and found only a recent decision from your own court a few weeks ago involving him. Do you know anything about him and what his argument is against you, if any?
I really don't. I know he had, I found, as soon as I Googled him too.
Right.
And the thing that popped up was that case. It was a case that was decided in the trial court adverse to him. He appealed it, the appellate court, a panel in Division I that did not include me.
Right.
But it was a panel of our court, affirmed the trial court. The only thing I can think is he's not happy about that, but I've never met him. I don't know anyone who knows him personally, and I've not spoken to him, so it's sort of a mystery.
All right. Any additional questions? We've got time for one or two more. Anybody? Anybody? Just sit here till someone has one.
Joel's hand could, no, your hand could.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Sure.
Okay. So what is the process from here? You make a recommendation to the.
We'll make a recommendation this evening, and I will hopefully, before I go to bed, email you the result of that. And then on Wednesday, our membership will make the final decision.
And I don't need to be present on Wednesday?
You don't have to be. You're more than welcome to come.
Okay. Unfortunately, I already plan to be out of town. So
That's
I'm
okay.
not going to be
You'll-
on Wednesday.
You will not be disqualified.
Okay, thank you.
So is this the first? I'll ask a question. Is this the first time that you've run a competitive campaign?
No, it is
Okay.
not. When I first I was appointed to the Superior Court bench by Mike Lowry in 1993, and I had a challenger that year. It was pretty hard fought campaign. He campaigned quite vigorously, as did I, but I prevailed. And I did not have another challenger in Superior Court for the rest of the time that I was there. But I did make a run for the Washington State Supreme Court in 2002. I was unsuccessful. Chief Justice, now Mary Fairhurst, prevailed, and she and I are great friends, so it's all good.
Right. All right. One more question. Anybody? Do you have a favorite current state Supreme Court justice?
If you say Mary Fairhurst, you get extra
You know, Mary and I mean, we actually had a great time when we were campaigning. I did not know her before that, and I was the first one to jump into the race, and so she tried to jump in, and I tried to talk her out of running against me. She said no, and, but we campaigned all across the state together, and we became really good friends, and she is, in fact, one of my favorite justices. So, there you go.
All right. I'll go ahead and call it and say we're out of time. Why don't you take 30 seconds for a closing statement?
I would appreciate your endorsement.
All right. Thank you very much.